The Hay hierarchy is like whatever the boys tell you to do, just because they're loud and angry and tough, you have to do it. We were being bossed around all day. They had unanimously decided that we were going to be the ones to go make everyone lunch. And the young feminists in us were like, no, I'm not doing that.
That's Meg MacDonald, recorded here in the NCPR studios in Canton, New York. And on today's episode of the show, well, it's going to get a little bit gross, so strap in. From NCPR and the Adirondack Center for Writing, I'm Ethan Shanty. This is The Howl. Did I ever mention before that my dad was a twin? My dad was Gene, and his twin brother was Dean. I'm close with my brothers, but how can you be closer than twins? I've heard a lot of times that they kind of share this special bond, like something out of science fiction, that they can almost read each other's minds, and I always wondered what that would be like. I never got to know Dean very well, even though he lived right up the road from us, but when he died, I could really tell that my dad was hurting. It wasn't so much what he said, I guess it's what he didn't say. And it was never more evident than on his 57th birthday, the first birthday he celebrated without his brother. I don't think anyone felt much like celebrating that day, but my dad always lived by this motto from the book Lonesome Dove: the best thing that you can do with death is ride off from it. So I guess that's what he was doing when he bought a bottle of Jack Daniels and a case of beer and started to get dirty, stinking drunk. I was there with a few of my brothers too, keenly aware that drinks were being poured in an effort to kind of forget that there was an empty chair at the table for the first time. And after a few hours, one of my genius, now nearly wasted brothers decides, hey, let's start doing tricks with these empty beer bottles. He fills one almost to the brim with water. He wraps his hand around the neck and brings his other palm down quick and hard on the top, and blam, the bottom blows out. For a couple of wasted guys, it's just about the coolest thing that they've ever seen in that moment. So now my dad obviously had to give it a go, now that he's a six-pack and a few shots deep. As my dad's hand connected with the top of that bottle, the bottom did blow out, but the neck also shattered and twisted in his hand. I don't know how much he felt in that moment, but pretty quickly it became apparent that he'd done some real damage. Blood was everywhere. If you knew my dad, you knew that he was not one to seek medical attention, but reluctantly he did let my mom drive him to the emergency room, where he discovered that he had actually cut through the tendon on his left ring finger and he would need surgery to repair it. I remember he even tried to tell a few people at work that he cut his finger doing the dishes, but all of them kind of balked at the idea that he was going to be scrubbing pots and pans. When they finally got him to give up the real story, they never let him live it down. It was a pretty sad state of affairs, if I'm being honest, seeing my dad, this big, burly, all-attitude guy, needing help to open jars while he's got this cast, this brace on his hand. And I realize telling you that story now that it's actually kind of intense and it was scary at the moment. But when my family all gets together and we reminisce, we actually laugh at that story. Because with a little time and a little distance, those really chaotic moments can become the stuff of legend. Just another part of your strange, wild tapestry. And I think every family is like that. Meg MacDonald certainly is, and she joined me in the NCPR studios to share one of those chaotic moments from her childhood, a story that's now famous in her family. Here's Meg.
I grew up in Richville, which is a very small town about 20 minutes south of here, and I had a really wonderful childhood because I was lucky enough to be just like a feral child. So I have two older brothers, and I lived right next door to my grandparents' farm, my aunt and uncle's farm, and my four cousins. So it was like less than a quarter of a mile. Basically, our moms would like open the doors, and we would just run outside the whole day and just wreak havoc on the natural world. So we would do all sorts of things, just like running through fields and making forts and doing all the cool country kid things. But one not so cool part of our childhood was being on the farm. You have to do hay in the summertime, and that's just a grueling experience. And I'm sure most like North Country listeners probably know what that experience is like, but in case they don't, it is not great. So basically, there's two jobs when doing hay. Either you're up in the mow or you're on the wagon. And so up in the mow, it can get upwards of 100 degrees. It's stifling. There's no airflow whatsoever. You're dodging bales as they're falling from the sky off of the elevator. You have to stack them properly. Otherwise, there's gaps and you get your boot stuck in there. And and everybody's yelling at everybody all the time. And you have to climb a ladder, a scary ladder, to get up in the mow if you've put in that amount of hay. Or if you're on the wagon, if you're in the back of the wagon, you're knocking the bales down, you're like on unsteady footing, people are yelling at you again, and you have to haul the bales up and throw them up to the front of the wagon. So the person at the front of the wagon is putting them on the elevator. So when you're putting them on the elevator, you have to make sure you do that properly. Otherwise, they'll like fall off and break. And you have to wear pants and like long sleeve shirts if you can, because the hay will scratch you up. And there's sometimes like dead animals stuck in the hay bales, and it's just gross and bad. And so everybody's just mad at everybody all the time. And it has to be done in hot, dry days because there can't be any moisture. It's if the bales mold, it's not good for the cattle. And like moist bales like can spontaneously combust and set your barn on fire, which is not great. So all of this stuff has to be done on hot, dry days. So I've got 4 cousins, and it's Tyler, Brandon, Sally, and Jordan, and my 2 brothers and myself. So there's 2 girls, and we had to contend with all these boys, right? So basically, they took mercy on us a lot of the time, but the hay hierarchy is like whatever the boys tell you to do, just because they're loud and angry and tough, you have to do it. So they would get irritated with us if we couldn't, throw the bales as quickly or whatever, if we couldn't stack them properly. So no matter whether we were in the mow or on the wagon, it didn't matter. We just always failed. So they would just like, oh, okay, go here, go here. So we were being bossed around all day. And we were younger too. So of course the older boys just got to make the choices. So we fought that as best as we could, but often didn't win. So lunchtime came around, and they had unanimously decided that we were going to be us, gals, were going to be the ones to go make everyone lunch. And the young feminists in us were like, no, I'm not doing that. Why? No, I'm not doing that. I'm not making everyone lunch. That's stupid. And we're like, go make your own sandwich. Go make your own sandwich and grab a bag of chips, whatever. And so they had fought that and decided that we were going to make them cheeseburgers. So finally, we went off in a huff. And now thinking back on it, we should have been super happy to just be able to go inside and hang out while they were still continuing to do hay. But, we were mad about having to make people lunch. So we're standing in front of this hot stove, cooking cheeseburgers in the middle of July. And we realized that there was like a really long hair in one of the cheeseburgers. And we look at each other and we don't say anything. We just like flip it and continue to cook it. So not really talking about it. We just continually plucked a hair from our heads and strategically placed them in each one of the burgers, except for the ones that we were going to eat, of course. So finally, the boys come in demanding their lunch. And Sally and I could not speak to each other. Like, we couldn't speak to each other. We couldn't look at each other, because if we did, we would lose it. There's no way that we would be able to keep up this ruse. So we don't look. We're just enjoying our lunch. And the most glorious moment was, one by one, each one of our brothers would like pull this long, cheesy, meat-covered, saliva spit string hair. Like, it was like a magic trick, like it just kept going. They just kept doing it. And so that would happen to one boy, and then the next, and then the next. And then the best part was when they realized that it was intentional and it just didn't accidentally happen. I mean, payback was sweet that day.
That was Meg MacDonald, recorded in the NCPR studios just a few months ago. Meg's a person who I've known for a long time, but we've never exactly been close. More like ships passing in the night. We worked together at my very first radio station job, and after it got bought out and we all got fired, Meg and I lost touch. But every few years we'd run into one another and catch up, and it always seemed like we were at a crossroads. And earlier this year, I got asked to host one of our live Owl Story Slams. Normally, that's not my job, but our regular host, Mitch, couldn't make it. So I loaded up my gear and I headed out to Morristown. And who should walk in to tell a story? Meg MacDonald, of course. When she got up on stage and told her first place winning story, I realized, man, I technically have known this person for years, but I know almost nothing about her. And I bet she's got a lot of amazing stories just like this one. And that's how I came up with the idea to change up this season of The Howl, to bring people into the studio and spill their untold story, just like the one you heard a moment ago. The story that she told live on stage was so inspiring and so good that I wanted you to hear that too. So here's Meg MacDonald again, this one recorded live at the Iron Horse Grill in Morristown.
Hi, everybody. I'm Meg. This is wonderful. First-time storyteller. Thanks a bunch. I say that I'm a first-time storyteller, but that's not true. I'm an actress, and so I've told many stories. And I think it was Shakespeare or probably some other poet that said something like, the riskiest business is that in the pursuit of love, or probably more accurately, the riskiest business is accepting a blind date that you were set up on by your roommate in New York City circa 2010 after graduating acting school. So that happened, and we ended up in this ice cream parlor that he was incredibly adamant about going to, and he was very adamant about sitting at this particular table, so much so that we waited 45 minutes. And I saw the empty tables that we could have sat at, but we had to sit at this one specific one, and I didn't know why. But I let him know ahead of time that I'm not a big ice cream person. I don't have anything against it, but I'm not a huge fan, but okay. So we get there, and I think, wow, this must be really good ice cream, really fancy stuff. And when the waiter came around with the menus, he said, we don't need those. I know what we're going to get, which is a huge risk ordering for me, first of all, particularly ice cream. But I allow that to happen and trust his judgment. And I shouldn't have, because he ordered Neapolitan ice cream, which was no offense to those Neapolitan lovers in here. But I think there was something much more exciting on the list. However, he tried to by adding gold flakes to it. So halfway about through this bowl of ice cream, I realized, you know what? Good guy, just not feeling it, so there's probably not going to be a second date. And at the end of that date, he says, do you want to split the bill? Okay. I am a modern woman. I have no problem doing this. How much can a bowl of ice cream cost? Well, a bowl of ice cream can cost $100. So I say, goodbye, thank you so much. And as I turn to hug him outside of this ice cream parlor, I realized he's like sweating profusely, like through his suit jacket, like a lot. And I ask him if he's okay, and he says, Meg, I have something to tell you. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay. What is that? And he's like, we have 4 blocks. And I was like, 4 blocks for what? 4 blocks until what? And he says, I'm lactose intolerant. And so we go. And I cannot have this man's death on my hands. I will not allow that to happen. And he is right. Within 4 blocks, like a beacon, like some oasis in the middle of the city, rises the Brooks Brothers bathroom. And I do my duty, no pun intended, to make sure that he comes out of there alive. And he does. Now, I don't know if this is my risk-taking nature, which I didn't think I had until this moment, or what, but in a weird twist of fate, I end up in his living room clutching a bottle of Blue Moon and my self-dignity. And so I'm standing there, and he has disappeared, and in front of me, I see his living room. And I see 2 doors, behind which I'm going to guess he disappeared. To my left, I see this antique, really uncomfortable looking sofa with like a puce-colored, you know the one. And then I see the largest crayon, like the largest crayon I've ever seen in my whole entire life. And then adjacent to me, I see this bunk bed in the middle of his living room with no sheets on it. So I have no idea what's happening. And mind you, this is before true crime podcasts. And so I'm trying to chug this beer as quickly as possible. And he reappears. And under one arm, he has a baby blanket. And under another arm, he has a baby book. And he sits down on this really uncomfortable sofa and beckons me to join him, which I do not. But I hold my beer and chug that while he tells me how 30 minutes every day he wakes up and mommy was so proud of him because he pushed his teeth back together. And in this baby book is the same pose from pre-K to 35 years of age. I am not even kidding you. And his teeth looked great. So, and to this day, being a film student, I don't know if mommy was behind door number 2 or somewhere in Ohio, but I bounced. Fast forward to a couple weeks later, I was recounting this war story with some other girlfriends. And as I'm telling this story, this look of horror comes across their face, and they're interjecting with, did he order Neapolitan? And did you see the baby book? And we put the pieces together, and as risky as it was for us to accept these blind dates, we realized that the biggest risk was that my roommate had set us all up on the same date with the same person, thinking that we weren't going to find out. Thank you.
That was Meg MacDonald with a double shot of stories on this episode of the Howl Podcast. Meg is a filmmaker and actor who runs the production company Dawning Film Productions. You can check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to come back next week when we'll hear from Deb Hall about her disastrous date with the Quarterman.
He opened the trunk, and it was filled with quarters. He had bags and crates full of quarters. He scooped up a handful of quarters, put them in his pocket, and we went up to the coffee shop.
The Howl is a co-production of NCPR and the Adirondack Center for Writing at Saranac Lake. Find out more about ACW by visiting adirondackcenterforwriting.org. You can find more episodes of this show and support us with a donation at ncpr.org/howl. This podcast is written, produced, and edited by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. David Summerstein edits my scripts. Doyle Dean is our production manager. Caitlin Kelly handles all things social media. And Bill Hanel is our master of digital ceremonies, whatever that means. Our theme music is by famous letter writer of Plattsburgh. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Ethan Shanty. This is NCPR.